Welcome back, my little YouTubers. This is my son Max. Max, will you say hi?
Hi.
And Max is going to help me describe the next 5 words in the chapter. So, we're going to start with the Babylonians. Can you say Babylonians?
Babylonians.
That's right. Then Hammurabi, one of the most famous Babylonian kings. Can you say Hammurabi?
Hammurabi.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then the Nile River, the center of Egyptian civilization. Can you say Nile River?
Nile River.
That's right. And then we'll talk about the pyramids.
The pyramid.
Yes, the most enduring architecture of the Egyptians. And then finally we'll end with Harappa.
Harappa.
From the Indus Valley civilization in India. Do you want to hang out for this, or do you want to go?
Hang out for me.
Okay. So first and foremost, we'll talk about the Babylonians. So Babylonians were a conquering peoples in Mesopotamia. The Babylonians were one of the few people who were able to kind of conquer and maintain control over the entire region. As you remember from our previous talk about Mesopotamia, it was a difficult place for anybody to control the entire area. And so the Babylonians were able to do so for a short period of time, at least a large part of it, and they were able to expand out the region and expand influence throughout Mesopotamia. So the Babylonians were important mostly because of their the written records that were left and the fact that they left a written law code. So the law code that they left actually comes from one of their most famous kings, who was Hammurabi. You remember him? Can you say Hammurabi?
Hammurabi.
Yeah, Hammurabi was a king who actually compiled a list of laws, and this was the first time that we know of in history where somebody had actually written down their laws and said, if this happens, this will be the punishment. If this happens, then this is what we'll do. And so this written law code is kind of the basis for the rest of, well, for the most part, Western civilization, because we consider it civilized to have a written law code. Can you say Hammurabi's written law code?
Hammurabi's written law code.
Yeah, pretty much. So after Hammurabi, we see that most societies started to have written law codes so that people knew what was expected of them, and this helped out society a great deal. So next we go to the Nile River. I know, it's pretty boring. The Nile River is in Egypt, was in Egypt and still is in Egypt, and the Nile River was kind of the basis for Egyptian civilization. All of Egyptians lived near the Nile River, and if you remember about settled agriculture in the Neolithic Revolution, it's pretty obvious why people lived near rivers. So the significance of the Nile River is that it was a life giver to the people of Egypt, and still is. It had very predictable flooding. You're making this look really boring, Max. I don't know. You got to be more excited. You got to like nod and say yes.
Yes.
Okay. Very predictable flooding, which was good for people, right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Farmers knew when the Nile would flood, and when it flooded, it was actually a good thing because it brought new soil. So they didn't have to engage in slash and burn agriculture. Every year, the Nile would deposit new, rich soil onto the people's land, and they could then farm a new crop for the next year. It was not a violent flood. It was predictable and controlled, and it was made the Egyptians a pretty happy people, especially compared to the Mesopotamians, because the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Max, do you remember those two rivers?
Yeah.
You remember that place, Mesopotamia? Yeah. The Mesopotamian societies dealt with sometimes violent floods, unpredictable floods, and so their view on life and the afterlife was pretty gloomy and dark compared to the Egyptians, who thought the gods love us because the Nile River always floods predictably, and it made them happy. So that's kind of the significance of the Nile River, and it still is a predictable and big river, important for travel and communication throughout the Egyptian region. Okay, the next river is the pyramids. Max, do you remember the pyramids?
Yeah.
Yeah. The pyramids are obviously Egyptian architecture, and they're tombs for the Egyptian pharaohs. And so the pharaohs were the people who led over all of Egypt, and these pyramids were their areas of rest. So one of the first things that Pharaoh did in his reign was start ordering the construction of his pyramid, which would be his burial ground. And some of the most famous Egyptian pharaohs are the ones that are most preserved and that people have later dug up and found and then kind of studied their remains. So like King Tutankhamun, or King Tut, was probably the most famous of the Egyptian pharaohs. Not necessarily the best Egyptian pharaoh, but probably one of the most famous because he was preserved so well. So most societies, the significance here is that most early societies had significant construction or durable construction or architecture, and the pyramids were the most fascinating aspect of Egyptian architecture because they were so durable and they were made in a way that people don't really fully understand because they didn't have cranes. Max, what kind of things do you need to build a huge building? What kind of machines?
A crane.
Yeah. What else?
A dump truck.
Dump truck. Egyptians didn't have a dump truck. What else do you need?
Yeah, and a front loader.
A front-end loader, yeah. The Egyptians didn't have front-end loaders. They built these huge pyramids, which were stories and stories high, without any kind of cool, big machines. Can you think of any other machines that are...
Yeah, I can.
What are they?
Excavator.
Yeah, they didn't have an excavator at all. Can you believe they built the pyramids just with their bare hands?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
I don't believe it either. So the pyramids are kind of this amazing monument to how clever and organized the Egyptians were. The last word today is Harappa. Do you remember that word?
Yeah.
Harappa. Can you say it?
Harappa.
Yeah. The Harappa were the peoples of the Indus Valley, and the Indus Valley is in India. The Indus is one of the largest rivers in India, and obviously people settled around the Indus Valley because they could do farming. And the Indians, the earliest Indians, or the Harappans, are you getting down?
No.
Okay.
No.
The earliest Indians, or the Harappans, were mysterious. And so the definition is they were some of the earliest ancient peoples of India. But the significance is they had a written system, they had architecture, they had knowledge and political structure and religion, but no one's ever deciphered the language of the earliest Indian peoples, and so we don't know very much about them. We know a lot about the early Chinese, we know a lot about the early Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, but the early Indians, we don't have a lot of knowledge because their writing was never deciphered. All right, Max, I want you to say goodbye to the kids.
Goodbye, kids.
And I want you to tell them to...
Be awesome.
Yeah, don't forget to be awesome. Bye.